Hello everyone, welcome to the first video on the French section of Info Index. Today I'm going to be introducing to you one of the most fundamental concepts of French learning, which is verb conjugations. So before this video starts, I'm going to assume that you guys already have a little bit of French knowledge, that you can translate some basic English words into French, like hello is bonjour, or pencil is crayon, and all of that. So French verb conjugation is probably one of the more intimidating aspects of French learning because there's so many different verbs and it's kind of hard to learn and memorize everything. So we're going to take it slowly. We'll break it down into each sort of individual concept, and through that we will help you become a great French speaker in the future. So before we get into actual verb conjugation, let's talk a little bit about infinitif, or verbs in infinitive form. This is the most basic form of a French verb, and it's non-conjugated. You'll see this a lot in a dictionary. So you might have something like, for example, manger, which means to eat, or courir, which means to run, or essayer, which means to try. So this is just a few examples of French verbs, but you'll notice that in French, every verb has a very specific ending, like these. And there are three endings that you will see in the French language, and they are ER, IR, and RE. And the most common one that you will see is this one, ER, like in these two examples. And this is the one that we will be discussing today. And we will talk about these in future videos. So today we're just going to conjugate verbs with this ending. So the basic setup when we're conjugating verbs is as follows. So we have je, you have tu, you have il, elle, nous, vous, il with an S, elle with an S. So this is our basic setup. And these are all singular form. These are all plural form, and this is first person, second person, third person, first person, second person, third person. So let's just pick a random ER verb. Let's say we pick parler. Parler. This means to talk. So how would we conjugate this? Well, let's start with je. So for ER verbs, we have for je no R at the end, so we omit the R, and there's no S either. It's just parle. So it would be je parle. And then for tu, there's always going to be an S at the end. No matter what verb you're conjugating, tu always has an S at the end. So this would be tu parle with an S. And for il and elle, they're usually the same thing, and they don't have an S. So in this case, it would be the same as je. Il parle, elle parle. And for nous, the usual ending is ONS. But in this case, if we were to just omit the R, we would have LEONS. We have E and O together. That doesn't really sound that great, so there's no E. We omit that. Nous parlons, like that. And for vous, instead of O and S, it's EZ. So it would be vous parlez, like that. And then for il and elle with an S, the usual ending is ENT. So in this case, it would be il parle, LENT. And the same thing for L. So one thing to keep in mind is that the conjugation for il and L and il and L with an S is always going to be the same thing. And for tu, we always have an S. For nous, we usually end with O and S. Vous, we usually end with EZ. So let's pick another example. Let's try dessiner, which means to draw. To draw. We have the ER ending, And we conjugate this the same way as parler. So for je, we have je dessine, no R. Tu, as we know, always has the S at the end. Tu dessines. Il and L are the same, and they don't have the S, so it's just il dessine, elle dessine. And then nous is O and S as usual. And again, we omit the E. Nous dessinons. Vous IZ. And then il ENT. And elle ENT. Just like that. So it's the same thing because it's a regular ER verb. So we're going to do one last example of regular ER verb conjugation, but this time there's going to be a little bit of an exception for one of these, and we will see what that is in a bit. So we're going to do manger, which is to eat. So I'll give you a few seconds to pause and figure these out for yourself, and we will see the answers in a bit. Okay, so for je, as we know, is no R, no S, it's just je mange. Tu always has the S, so it's tu manges. Il has no S or R, it's the same thing as je, il mange, and L is the same thing as il. Elle mange. We will skip nous for now. Vous, as we know, is EZ or EZ. Vous mangez. And il, elle with the S, ENT. ENT. And ENT. So I skipped nous because the exception is for this one. So for the other two examples, we omitted the E. But if we omit the E this time, we would get this. How would you say this? Nous mangeons? That doesn't sound right. And it doesn't, because it's wrong. So this is one of the exceptions. Whenever you have a G here, you don't want to omit the E. You want to keep the E because this way it would sound like mangeons, mangeons. And that's how you say it. So make sure you keep the E whenever you have a G preceding it. That's just one of the exceptions for regular ER verbs. But usually you would omit the E when you don't see the G. So yeah, those are just a few examples of ER verb conjugations. And here is a list of everything we talked about. So the endings for je is E, tu is ES, il, elle, E, nous, ONS. But remember we have the exception over here. Vous is EZ or EZ, and il, elle is ENT. And I encourage you to practice just picking a few ER verbs and practice these conjugations on your own, and that will help you to become a better French speaker. And yeah, that's it. So we will be discussing IR and RE endings in future videos.